All right, so we're going to start and we're going to land into the circulation of the ribs and the breathing muscles, but not to leave out the support of the kind of the core four here. So kind of in lieu of a whole anatomy instruction, we're going to work with the basis of the reality of how we kind of respirate, and we focus on the respiratory base and the core influence, right? So when I lift up my core and I'm on my back, my bolster is horizontally under my ribs. And so then I'm trying to get my ribs, and you can lie your head on your blanket so you're not trying to flinch and tighten up your upper neck. I want you to feel that awareness of the ribs moving laterally and broadening out. And I know that the hips touching down the back of the pelvis to the block gives a little bit of hypermobility and arch in the spine. So see if you can tamp that down so you have your feet walking in towards your seat so that the knees have a pointy up position. Feel the tailbone press down. So the pelvic floor really has the tailbone as the back zone and the sitting bones as part of that layer of awareness. Step the feet out as wide as you comfortably can, so they might be a little closer in the edges of your mat. And then take a sandbag or a bag of weight, where that might be, and place it across. And across where it's comfortable for you, but we will do some arm circulation stretches. So if you feel it's better at the top of your thighs, kind of nestle it down. And then if you push the legs down, like you're going to reach into a heel and then into another heel. And then after you have all heels forwards, the emphasis here will be to kind of rock a little bit back and forth with the heels. Heel rocking is nice to do. It kind of lulls you into a balancing inner rhythm. And then I'm going to reach back to my belt and ensure that my head's weight is relaxed on the blanket. Okay, the heel rock can stop anytime, or you can continue doing that heel rocking if it calms you, centers you. And then when you're holding onto your belt, I want you to try to slide your hands out on the belt so that it's easy in the ribs. So that might be far and far and far out, farer. The farthest out you can go, so your elbows might touch a little to the floor besides the blankets. So broaden the chest. If the knees are really trying to buckle back and you can feel them swooping back and under, you might turn your feet out, right? So hyperextending would not be a great idea. So your choice of a little bit of rotation out with the feet would be better than too much pressure in the back of the knee. So as the breath slides in through your awareness through the nose, let your eyes close. And as the exhalation empties out of your lungs, start to let your attention cycle through the experience of your connective tissue in the front of the body and how it affects the back body, where it feels really pretty stable, right? There's a lot of strength in the back body from this position. It's a back bend, it's a chest opener, so it strengthens the back line, opens the front. So feel the belly flow up with the inhale and relax back through the body on the exhale. So throughout the practice, you might set an intention internally for an area to bring focus to, an internal adjustment that you're aiming towards. And it might be simply letting that exhalation really clear out on a cellular level. Take a few more moments here. You might let go of the belt. This is likely a good time to let that go. And then concentrate on the leg parts and feel if you can slide a foot in at a time towards the groins into Baddha Konasana, feet together, knees apart. And I suggest you keep it comforting for your knee joint. So the feet might be a little farther forwards than too close and gripping. And feel where the leg muscles part, but they continue, they move together at the base, which is unlike your daily stroll, right? Your feet are usually, well, they're apart when you're strolling. They're now connected. Okay, now we'll take an arm pattern. So if you have sand on your ribs, you're going to slide it down at this point or take it off. And then cross the left arm over the upper chest, hold the left elbow with the right hand, and feel if you can actually guide that deltoid to a stretch. You know, noticing this simple awareness. This is the same pattern we do when we're in side sage with the arm crossing, but it's under you. So when you change sides, go to the next side, feel, and we'll do 2 on each side. So just feel where the concentration is around your arm, your upper back, your shoulder. Does it feel more dense on one side than the other? And change sides. It might be that the arm that's crossing touches the floor easier on one side across the body. So give it a couple more moments of exploration. And then when you switch to that final side, if you've gone each side twice, that's good. The feet together, the knees apart. Now come back center and bring the knees to point up. As the knees point up, you're going to slide your sand aside and grab a hold of your belt overhead. And feet are pretty tidy. In fact, lift up the right heel. And then as you move that right knee towards the core, so the knee simply comes up and draws in, your foot is peeled off the floor, move the hands holding the belt towards that right knee. And inhale, stretch the arms back, foot touches down, and exhale, switch sides. So it's going to be a rather regulated pace and continuous. So as we take these last few moments on this reclining opener, I want you to consider observing the back of the pelvis, the movement in that alternating pattern with the scooping of the tailbone, which is a fairly challenging position for most of us. When I lift up my knee, I want to use the opposite foot to press and then target the sense of moving my back to flexion, like a cat spine, right? So take a couple more of these. That's good. Yep. So when you get a feel for that movement pattern in your back, okay, and as the legs move both down, we're going to take a quad stretch. So how will we do that in this perspective? We're going to go to a side. So taking a side, we're going to lift up the hips, slide the block away, keep it nearby when you roll to your left side, and then place the block before down besides underneath that right leg, and see if you can hold on to the right ankle and stretch into your quad. Now your left arm might need to be on the blankets. You might have to tuck them in. You might like to have a little bit of a drop off with the elbow, but kind of feel this rib motion, right? Do I push it into the bolster? Do I rotate it? And I encourage you to to use that hold of the ankle. And if that's a little difficult on your knee, you can use your belt and hook that to the actual foot itself and then stretch back. So you might not want to have it such a closed chain quad stretch. If pulling your foot to your buttock is too tense on the knee joint, hold the foot with a belt and then stretch it back and turn your head towards the floor. I prefer the leg on the block and then still trying to feel that pivot. So this pivot is important, that your ribs are on the bolster, the left side beam. And then we're going to take the belt off or the hand hold off of the foot, and we'll maneuver a block overhead. So it's about low to mid height. And then as you set up for this side sage, push the bolster in so it's tucked as close to your base of the left side of your side waist. Your obliques are completely supported. Yep. And then as you lean into it, try to get that sand so it's higher up. Okay. We're going to have 2 sand layers. And if you're sand free, that's okay. You'll have 2 opportunities to be with the simplicity of a sand free event. Okay. So those sanded, have it fairly high up if that's okay for your shoulder joint. Feel where it sets up into that pec ridge. That's kind of what it is, isn't it? It's not quite the back of the body. It's like in between the front and back. And your pec insertion is in that land. So feel this side zone. It's like we're kind of going through the whole inner environment today. And let the weight of your head relax into the blankets. If your left leg is not content on the block, you can switch it for the ball. Okay? So get the feel of relying on your props to hold you and support you. And feel what work is still to be done, right? Inside the body, in the bones, really trying to help the circulation in the arms and the hips. That right leg can start to stretch farther back or keep it where it's at. And steep the breath into that sand layer, right? In breath, fill the lungs. Out breath, centering down. Now, as we process this position, taking an opportunity here to either move the sand a little lower, which would actually be for where you feel the bones, the densest, right? And I suppose you could put the sand right into that mid bridge, right? Kind of the rib bridges here. So I'm going to put the sand on my hip, which actually puts a little more weight into my knee. So you might have to divvy that up between the sand a little bit in the dip in the middle. But we'll spend about 30 seconds here. We've been in the shape for a little while, but just trying to clean it up all the way down through the side beam, which will continue even when we sit up. But recognize where it's comfortable on the side to stretch the intercostals. Feel that expansion of the ribs. And then as you exhale, feel the centering of the waist. Good. Okay, so when we come back to whatever reality is from this pose shape, being on your side, it seems like at some point you would get up, whether it's sitting or a little higher. So we'll take our stages. We will get up to standing a little today, but we're going to take off the sand, let it slide off, and then curl a little into the left. And then when you come up, we're going to keep this side working today. So when you come up, I want you to, actually, you're kind of on the side beam of your bolster. I know it's hard checking out what the screen indicates, but simply sit up on it, wherever you happen to be. Try to make it pretty easy going. And then when the left leg is bending, you're going to cross the right leg over the left, and then taking a block set over to the left side, and you're going to lean your elbows on that. Okay, so if that's confusing, I'll give you a back vision of it too, so you can kind of see. So I'm sitting, I'll give kind of a side variation, crossing the right leg over left, so you can see how the spine is moving. And then I lean over to the left side. Okay, so I'm still working in the side chamber that I was recently extending on this way, right, with the arm over. But now getting a little bit more deep through the ribs. Okay, so give it a few moments. We want to stay with that pattern for enough time to kind of feel the continuation of the work that we were presenting to it. You can have a sandbag on the left inner leg. That's a helpful tip on this one. But it really depends on if you feel like you want to add anything to it. You know, adding things doesn't mean it's in more advanced shape. Okay, so when you're leaning down, you want to feel that waist, feel that contour, right? Contour, so you're using this position to hydrate the tissues. Hydrate through the spine, sides of the waist, right through the kidneys, low back waistline. Now, without this being too dramatic for a positional shift, when your elbows are leaning into the blocks, whatever height they have become for your needs, right? Whether they're low, medium, or high, we're going to try to work our way now to turning to our right. So you're going to bring your right arm open, use your blocks to bring you up, and then turn right so that hand moves back or it holds onto the sandbag loop. Okay, left hand to the right leg and hug that leg towards the left when you twist. Okay, so if you have some concern in this right knee, you don't have to pull the knee. You could bring your foot a little forward and reach your elbow to the outside of that right leg and turn. So what I suggest you monitor here is the sensation of circulation in your waist that we've kind of jogged through in the last two poses and now to pose 3. So I'm going to work with the hand holding the loop on the sand, and then that helps adjust me to move my right elbow back. Okay, so feel where the left arm is helping you out. Usually the arm striding across to the right leg and nab that, right? Hold on to that with the arm and then kind of briskly move through your torso and twist. Breathing. Now, as you unwind, you're going to slide the right foot in front of the left knee, just in front, and then take the sand over to the right upper thigh, and then let the legs kind of open out so you're in a cross-legged position, right leg forward of left, and then get a hold of your blocks. Place them up to the mid or the high setting in front of you, and then start to settle your hips forward, right? In fact, what settles might feel like your hips move down into the bolster, your sitting bones as well, and your knees have a motion of moving out. So let the blocks be at what height works for your hands or your elbows to be on them, and then make that process really count in your lower back. So feel if you can let your spine move to the weight of your brain forward and down. And it's okay to let there be some flexion in your back. We might not want to have the head touching the floor, even if it could. We're trying to get our back body to fluctuate between arching and rounding. So feel that right hip working. And funny enough, we're going to try this one today to blend into this. So we're going to slide the sand forward, place both feet together, and place the sand across them. Okay, so my knees have a diamond shape, right? The legs are more diamond. And then when I lean forwards, I have my blocks. Yeah, it's a little bit of a stretch here into the legs and the real sphere of awareness in the back of my leg, inner thigh. So when I move forward, you can take your blocks up. You might decide to back off and come back up to sitting tall and closing your eyes and breathing. If it's enough to sit with the knees out, that's fine. So give yourself a couple options, because just that tilt forward a few degrees makes a difference in your inner thighs. Yeah, work the legs. Let the waist channel motioning down. Yeah, you'll notice the farther forward your feet go on this, which is what we're going towards, is it stretches around from the inner leg and it wraps around to the IT band to the lateral rotators on the side of the legs. So it does change just by the weight of your upper body lowering down. Give a few more breaths here. Yeah, we'll change the whole experience in the leg. So when we take the blocks out, we shift up to sitting tall. Hold on to the lower bones of the legs, slide the feet to each other next to the, closer to the bolster. Maybe not right next to it, but somewhat a little bit closer than a second ago. Sitting up. Okay, and then feel when we lean forward, we're going to take our sand away. And we're going to take that left quad stretch. So what I want you to do is slide off the bolster, turning to your right hip now. And then take the block so it's inside that left leg, and you're going to hold the left foot or use the belt under the foot. And then lean down. Now, the generic of this is you hold your head in your hand and you stretch away the left quad. That's as old as it gets with this pose shape. So some of you might find that's classic and it's kind of good, but it's very different on our quads. And we're going to work the quads a bit in the kind of the mid part of the session, so we'll get to them. So I want you to feel when you're on your side, if you have to lean back, I'm leaning back to look towards the screen, but if you have to lean back to get the surface of the front of that left hip flexor, or if you tend to feel comfortable leaning into the bolster. So be sensitive to the left thigh and how it feels in comparison, right, from a moment ago. It's quite different. And then you might just take this into the next shape pretty quickly. You might stay with that block under the knee and kind of move so you land into your right outer buttock, and then add your sand so you're at the upper ribs. Now, this might not be the case for everybody. Some of us might take our block away and put our ball on the inside because it's just got a little bit more of a cushiony structure to touch down. But as that sand lifts up, take a block overhead. I know it's important to have props, isn't it, for this? This is prop yoga. Okay. And as that sand is on the upper ribs, lengthen through that left arm. Okay. Feel where your waist makes a motion to lengthen via the position you placed it in, but also it has to go with the breath in balance. So balance inwards and exhale outwards. Both the in and the out breath are required for balance. So try to shed something each breath instead of taking it all in. And I think sometimes in a class environment, you kind of hold that sound a bit. There's a little bit of that issue with the environment. So at home, you might feel a little bit more comfortable with your breathing, exploration, even with kind of exploring the shape and changing the dynamic of the upper arm or the weight of your head on the blanket. Maybe you have the back of your head on the blanket now, not the side. So anything where you're not kind of tightening around in the sides of the neck or in the shoulders. So give it a few more moments. Change the sand if you're prepared for that. Move it down to your hip. Noticing once you get there and lift up from there, is that's better or you missed something from the last weight on the upper rib cage. I think that tells us quite a bit about our posture, right? When we notice this area in the upper chest, just the chest itself, actually the tension, the restrictions when we stretch, it almost always feels like it's a little tense. Some more than others, I'm sure. But, it doesn't get the same hydration and motion like our hips do when we walk a bit. It doesn't swing back very often like this. So soak it up. Yep. You'll have plenty of time later to soak up other things, but right now soak up some of the shapes. And this is where we go with the side. Okay, so we have this long lane of circulation for the respiratory spaces, the intercostals, the breathing muscles between each rib. They're live, right? They're actively mobilizing with your breath, depending on how much air you can get in your lungs is dependent on their movement. So when we come around to our right hip now, we're going to roll a little bit into that side and then scoop the left knee into the right knee. And then try coming into that shape up. And then when I turn to come up to sitting, I then cross my left leg over the right. Yeah, it's rather continuous for the waist. And then get that sand on the right thigh. I think you could get into the shape by your side and kind of roll a little bit up to get there. It would be a nice one to sample on your own if you're just doing side stage work, how to get into this continuation. So I have sand on my right thigh. And then when I'm turning to the right, keep in mind, your blocks are right across from your right thigh, adjacent to your bolster. They're not behind your bolster. Okay, so you want to feel like this back area is supported above with your body sitting centered as well as you can, and lean to the right and have a moment of your awareness in this left upper pocket. It's kind of like all the way from this left side, right? It's pretty intense right here into the side waist. So try to get some circulation there, whether the arm needs to lift, stretch open, reach, lower to the blocks. Feel that you can fill up that balloon of the side right here before we twist. So try to fill up that side balloon. Right, start blowing some balloons. Now left arm goes up, and speaking about the breath, we're going to turn to our upper lifting. Yep. And then I use the blocks to kind of give me a little bit of a helping hand to get up. And then as I swing around the waist, right, it could be your hand holds the knee. This is typical where the leg gets picked up a little bit. So I'm going to try to park my sitting bones. And then I can see if I can stretch my left knee up, right? As soon as my sitting bones are anchored. But if I go into a habit of swinging back and then hooking the elbow, then I'm not necessarily causing damage, but long term might not be the best way of pulling along the ligaments in the back here. So we're going to try to turn the waist to the left and use your arm to press. Turn the waist and get a feel if your upper arms, right, have some security here. And if that left hand trickles back behind you, or you decide to reach up onto your back, and maybe you can get a loop of your sandbag. Yeah, if you've got a little attachment on your sandbag, it's a nice one to do. Yeah, so feel that right arm. If you can kind of press into the arm bone and straighten the arm a little bit, that might be helpful for your sense of confidence with the shape. There we go, good. Yeah, feel where that arm is touching to that leg. And then when you're turning, you want to feel if you can turn your left chest open to the back. There we go. Massaging into the organs and keeping it a comfortable enough twist that you're breathing effectively, slowly, calmly. Come back into the front, keep it in motion. Now we'll take the left foot, slide it forward, and let the knee release open. Move the sand to the upper left thigh. Situate your sitting bones. That old habit of grabbing underneath and kind of moving the sitting bones apart is a pretty helpful one, but try to find it so that it's comfortable in your lower back. And lately I've been working a bit on trying to really take over the bolster with my poses, like not be halfway on the bolster, but just take over the bolster. So I'm kind of pushing it down. I'm on that bolster. And then when I lean forward on this position, let's take our blocks. You decide if your left foot is going to move a little forward, if it's going to move closer to the right knee, and maybe you want a ball under the left knee, right? Anytime you can suspend the knee so that it feels like it's supported then. If it's suspended and lifting, see if you can support the knee itself. Yeah, and then through this first phase of the practice, now we've kind of come through the hip channel. So spend a few moments. If you're pretty eager to get deeper into the hip, you can always move your blocks and hands over to the right side, right? That's always an option. Depending on the hip you're focused on, you go to the opposite side with your upper body to angle into that joint. But we'll keep it pretty basic here. Okay, so feel, before we get on hands and knees, I want you to try to encourage where you feel your sitting bones. So it's not such an alien kind of reality when you move back. And noticing that it's somewhat limiting to move my core right now. I'm kind of stuck where I'm sitting, getting into my hip, but that's about what it amounts to. And then when you come back open with the blocks, this is where we're going to hopefully encourage you to have some excitement about patterns that are somewhat standing, right? Not outstanding, but standing upright patterns. So when we come back, this time we're going to slide the sand away And you'll want to have a block towards the back of your mat. I'll get this one, will be easier to see for you. And then when you come back, we don't have to worry about all the setup with the props right now, but as far as your blanket, I would just get rid of one so it's off to the side in easy reach. You'll likely use that. You'll want to have your left leg move back, but instead of a pigeon pose, let's pass on the pigeon. We're going to bring the right knee back and we're going to center the knees down and then actually use the bolster under your thighs and lean forwards. And since the bolster changes the angle on the pelvis and the spine and the legs, it's kind of nice to center on this for the hands opening and feel where the weight is in your hands. Okay, so study this for a mini moment here. We're going to come back with our hands and knees, turn the bolster straight forward so you'll have a different perspective. And then you're going to lower down, and I don't know about you, but this kind of feels like a little more support in my pelvis. It's more bolster, and the hips have not as wide of a support, right? The front of the pelvis. So when you lower down all the way, kind of towards crocodile pose, might as well do crocodile for a moment. Bring a blanket in and roll it up so that your blanket is supporting your forehead, okay? Arms are gonna be out in a little wider hands than cactus, right? So instead of trying to pull in your shoulder joint, I want you to let your hands spread outwards. And as your head lowers down, let your feet space themselves out with a little bit of separation with the knees. And feel the breath inside filling up and then relaxing down. Relax the rear. You know, from this base of length in your back, inch by inch, we're going to slide the hands in by the sides of the bolster. Now they're a little distant from my bolster, and I'm not so interested in the exact measurement, but I'm interested in the inner feeling. So for some of you, your hands might be a little farther out. Your elbows might be kind of winging out, like little wings moving outwards. So play with how sensitive your back is. Now, as I lift up into this upward dog, I'm going to let my elbows be really wide and just kind of play with the experience of my back muscles working to get that complete core and pelvic floor awareness. So move up to that up dog, inhale. And then as you come back about halfway, to me, this is the most important part of the sequence, but I know it's not like the pleasurable deep stretch sensation, but notice the particulars here. Slide the hands in and then toes hook under. And then when you lift up through the hips, you're going to add a block between the ankles. And my block is pretty wide. Yeah, it's pretty wide. And then when I come back up, I think this bolster's got to go. Bolster's got to go. So we're going to move the bolster. Actually, let's take it to the very front of our mat. So just push it forwards. And then when you're reaching your hands, not on the bolster, but just behind it, closer to you, you're going to round your back so you have that hollowing of the belly, round it. And then inhale, arching the spine. And exhale, rounding the back. I guess it was a week ago, it was Halloween, huh? Wow, that seems like a long time ago. Inhale, arching. Okay, now exhale when you're rounding. Can you feel these incremental motions with the body without kind of trying to tuck and tighten? I think this is the pelvic floor challenge, right? So I'm going to keep the hands open. I'm going to round the back. And now when I round my back, I'm holding onto that block with the ankles, like to the point I could lift it up for a tiny moment there, whatever a tiny moment means. Okay, now when you come forward to up dog, feel the weight in your hands, I'm sure, but also I want you to try to keep the hands fairly close underneath you to target that length in the core. Try to push a little into the block. Come back to table, reach to your bolster, bring it in as much as you need. So your hands are reaching, your wrists are stretching, and your head is down, so it's almost a child's pose. If your head doesn't feel comfortable this far down, just tuck in a blanket. You can kind of wad up a blanket a little bit and put it under your forehead. So you feel that stretch without the wrist pressure, but it's stretching around the wrist. Feel the hips move back. Okay, now as you round your back into cat, now you're going to come back to down dog. So blanket goes aside, hands under shoulders, toes under. And then as you lift up the knees, you can either keep the block where it's at, which would be ideal, just let it be there. And then holding on to that containing support, feel reaching back through the chest. Okay, now this is a fairly short, lengthwise dog pose I've created. So I'm going to try to walk the hands a little forward. You can play with this depending on your flooring and make sure that your block is on a mat. Some people like to work with this one, stepping a foot on the block and really getting a stretch into that leg, switching the foot that's on the block, not having both feet on the block, but stretching deep into the calf, and then having that experience of that block between. Now walk on back to your feet and keep the block there, turn it so it's at its mid setting, so the feet are scooting in a little bit further to the midline. And then let the spine come into a full forward bend. Okay, it depends on what's comfortable for you, holding the elbows or letting the arms trickle down, any of the after effects in the shoulders from the previous few minutes. Let the weight of your head stretch your spine. Feel the rib cage, feel the length in the back. Now, can your sitting bones achieve directionally moving away and up, right, versus tucking under? So it's an opposite version of your daily living, which is usually tail is in, right? So now you have the tail just back for a moment, so the whole back body can kind of wash up. And we'll keep that wash up attitude actually. So I'm going to give you two ways of coming into the next shape. So we're going to encourage the cycle of kind of juicy movement through the shoulders and kind of streaming through the legs. So as you walk your hands on forwards, take that pattern of moving your knees down, however it works best for your hips. And then I'm going to take the block so I have them both in front. And the bolster might be kind of in your way, but I'm going to use it for some of the standing poses. It's kind of nice to have extra height. So when we come up to this right foot stepping to the front of your mat, I want you to actually lower down the back leg to the point of feeling the top of the thigh stretching, but the feet are really parallel patterns. Yeah, so if it's easiest for your, or basically correct for your alignment, not easiest, but accurate for your bones to have your back knee off of the blanket right now, that's fine. But we're going to alternate between lunging and reverse lunging. So that would mean toes up, head down. So inhale, lunging forward, lift up through the chest, inhale. And exhale, lower down. Toes back and up, head down. Inhale forwards. Arching, make sure that right knee is not over the ankle. Scoot the toes forward if it is. And then coming back, reverse lunge. Now, as you approach lunging, keep the back knee off of the blanket, okay? Feel if you can actually engage in the legs for a moment in time as the back heel stretches towards the floor. Press into the back heel. Look at your left foot. If it's turning out, that's okay. But I want you to try to work with reaching the heel to the ground and moving the right hand to the sacrum. Reach it behind you to your base of your spine. And then feel if you can start to straighten out the right leg. So feel the energy through the right heel and the left top of the foot, the ball of the foot, the bottom of the foot, but the bottom top. Pivot your waist, turn to the right. Give a moment of twisting. Just breathing, rotating. Okay, now as you turn back down, you're going to grasp your block on the other side and turn everything to left, toes in. Heels are a little bit outwards, but take a wide angle, forward bend, and you get to be the deciding point person on how you are putting weight into your hands and your feet. So I'm going to introduce as much weight into my feet as I can. And then maybe separate that position so they're parallel so there's less knee pressure. Right? So if my toes are in and I have a fairly flexible back line, then I tend to hyperextend a lot of my knee. So if they're a little more parallel, it's a little harder to do. So then as the thighs pull up, right, they draw up with the kneecaps, and then you have your blocks under you. Now I want you to try to work with the blocks or the hands between the feet. So you're moving back versus going towards that down dog variation. So if your blanket is in the way, just shift it. And then bend your elbows, and you're going to lower your head to the floor. Now your hands could be on your blocks, right? In between the feet. Your hands could be on the blocks, elbows back, head down. Yeah, careful concentration here on feeling the circulation good to the brain, feeling the weight into the feet, and if it's moving forward to the balls of the feet or if it's producing more weight into the heels. I know you might be able to do a little rocking forward and back as long as you don't feel you're tipping to the somersault. But getting a feel of the weight into your feet. Nod your head a little side to side now, as long as your head is not nodding on the actual floor. And then when you are in that position of head nodding side to side, you're going to start to bend your knees. And then take a position where you are walking back to that right foot with block. So pivot toes back to the right. And then as you turn, you're going to step the left foot to the right foot. So you're back in that forward bend pattern. Okay, now try here to bend your knees and be kind of naturally polite to your hips. So we reach a little forward like a chair pose. So it is a challenging moment for your thigh muscles. So you're in more of a squat. And then as you reach back down, can you touch onto the blocks? Let your head surrender its weight down. And then looking down, or actually looking back, you might do that too. You'll step the right foot back. And now as you're on that second side, we'll introduce the knee back down to the blanket. So pattern the weight into your thighs. It's kind of nice to do these before we do our back series with the legs up and crossovers so that you are kind of cleaning out, right? The circulation through the joints, through the hamstrings, through the inner leg strings, right? The adductors. So when I feel that lunge, I'm going to alternate forward and back. So feel the flexing of the foot. Feel the stride into that left foot and move the chest a little bit forward. And then feel the body move down and back. Toes up on the left foot. You can do this without the back knee on the blanket, right? You might like that type of experience through the musculature of the legs and the cooperation of your upper body. And then start to come to a lunge so the back knee is lifting up and the heel is reaching to the floor. It's not always a perfect pose world, right? You might have that instruction, but it doesn't come to experience in your leg. So your back foot might be parallel and shaking. So if that's the case, I would turn it a little bit out so that you'll feel the heel in the midline, and then work on reaching that left heel down. Stretch your torso forward. Get the blocks up as high as you find possible, if they don't have another height. And then reach that left hand to the sacrum. And feel when the legs are very full and steeping. And then maybe you turn your torso a little to the left, and maybe you stay with the torso facing down, but still affecting your hip. Yeah, so noticing if I turn my head with the waist turning, it might be easier when you're in your home practice to do those explorations, right? Because it's not like you're looking to where it's going in the group as much. You're kind of following what's best for your neck, which is concerning. So if I look down when I keep the twist, that's okay. I don't have to twist my head and neck. Now let's bring that left arm up for a second. Just feel the arm turning and opening. And then as you lower the hand down, we didn't really use the bolster much for those, did we? Okay, well, let's shift it up. Can you get your bolster, kind of slide it through? I know we've never done this type of move, but hey, why not? Okay, take the bolster, anything goes. If you need to completely get out of the shape and get your bolster behind your heel, that's fine. It doesn't have to choreographically be all the same. But we have our bolster in the center of the mat. And now we're going to lower down to that back knee. This will work out pretty good because we have a pigeon pattern on the other side already. So walk over the left foot to the right side of your mat. Shift your knee open and then bring the right leg forward or something like that. Okay, look back and make sure that you have a blanket behind you, maybe a cat. Who knows what you have around? Okay, dog, that kind of stuff. Julie has a bird. Okay, so we'll have our blocks, and I want you to take this pretty much right away. Yep, right away. We're going to go into the legs up. We've had each leg working fairly vigorously. So now we're going to be on the edge of the bolster. So I was watching the recording of this and to see if I actually was able to get that. And it looked like I was almost off of the bolster with my tailbone. So you do want your tailbone to the edge so you have more breathing support in the pose and more support for the stimulation of the flow of lymph, therefore for the immune system. So if that's hurtful for your back, then getting farther in the middle might be best, but try to get your tailbone to the edge. And then as we get our sand, we're going to flow the sand support beneath our feet. When we push that up, that flow in the legs is kind of nice. After the last maybe 45 seconds a minute ago, you were in a different position with your legs entirely. So now that we're at the new normal for this final phase of the session. Time goes fast, huh? Jeez. All right. So when you flex through your feet, I want you to work a bit with the weight production of the sand into your feet. I know some of you are used to 2 sandbags for a while, and now you may be used to 1. So however it is with your arms open, spatially widen out through your arm channel, feel the rib cage, and then feel the fluctuation of your feet, flexing. Tailbone does attempt to press a little bit into the bolster, and you can tailor that with your breath. So as you breathe in, really fill the lungs. And as you exhale, soften through the vital organs, massaging the organs. So feeling the connection of the diaphragm down to the very front of the pelvis. Right, so we want to feel those connectors in the kind of the corridor of the core muscles, moving with the breath. Try moving your feet a tiny bit forward so that you're in that sweet spot of the core band. If that causes a bit of disturbance in the core or challenge in your back muscles, you would not want to go there, but you might find that a little bit of that core stimulation could be good. So as we let the eyes maybe get kind of lazy, feel the awareness peeking through the legs. Maintain that lift of both of them. And then we'll bend the knees and we'll lift the feet back up. So you're pushing. So take a few more leg presses, or take 4, and feel the threshold of your body when you're pushing up. So you might find that you need to move your knees a little farther back towards your upper body, your chest, before you push up to actually feel the back of the legs. But now we come back to the knees bending and we move our sandbag away for the moment. We're going to take our belt and we're going to get the belt and slide it under that right foot, stretch it straight up into the belt, left leg down, and minus any sand ingredients here. Feeling when you hold the belt together with your left hand, you're going to feel, and this is where I'm going to actually push my body a tiny bit back on the bolster so I can get my hips to move around, right? If I'm too far on the other side of the bolster, then I basically can't get my hip to stretch as deep. So adjust as you need to on top of your bolster, and then cross the right leg to the left, but feel if you can get your right hand onto that upper outer right thigh, just directing the circulation downstream, just encouraging it to go away from you versus closer up into you. But I feel it inside, deeper into the track of the hip when I have my hand on the hip. We'll repeat this pattern when we have no belt soon enough. Now bend that right knee and get a feel when you pull on the belt and you bend through the knee, strengthen, and then lengthen one more time over to the left with that right foot. So stretching over. It's a little downstream, but it's across the body. Now the right hand can stretch open on the floor. Let it be easy. Good. And then as you bend through that right knee, you're going to simplify and stretch up the left foot into the belt. Bend the right knee, lower it down. Change the crossing, right hand to the belt, cross the left leg to the right, and feel where the muscles are starting to kind of soar in your hip. Not S-O-R-E, but they might get sore. We're going to do this shape twice today, so it could be something you feel, but hopefully a nice opening feeling for your hips and your lower back so you can dance away. So get a feel when you cross over, does your foot flex or do you not need to make any moves there? You could use the hand held belt on the foot to stretch the foot. The less you can force, likely the better, right? So if you're working in your practice and you're using your props well intended, you might find the underlying conditions can soften and open up with that care and consideration. So we're going to keep this left hip as a focus point in a pose ahead. So kind of keep your eye on the prize for this one. So as my leg crosses, I'm going to bend the left knee. So feel when you bend the knee and then you try to straighten it back over to the right side. Do you feel that kind of slides in the hip itself, the muscles around the attachments? So when you bend it, that's an area, if you do ball rolling on the leg, you might notice that's a good space to touch down to. So slide the belt off, bring the knees on up, feet comfy, and bring the hands to your bolster. Push the bolster away, spine centered, feet on top, and windshield wiper. Be sure your bolster is not too close for comfort on that windshield wiper. Okay, give it a few moments. Knees are going to go side to side. Make sure if you've got a ball, you've got it nearby. All the props are going to be important here in the final spinal. Okay, so when I go knees side to side, I'm going to emphasize here when you bring it back into center that you're going to press down into your bolster and be sure that when you push into your feet, that your back muscles can lengthen down. If they're tightening in the low back, then your bolster is too close to you. So maybe just nudge it a little bit at a time. So feel your arms stretching behind you overhead, and you can either reach the palms to face towards each other or turn the palms open towards the ceiling. Feel the difference in the ribs, and then push down into your feet and lift up your hips in the bridge pose. Okay, now feel that energy that runs through the back of the legs. Now, as you lower your hips down naturally, you're going to bring your arms up and over and down to the sides of the body. Yeah, be rather limitless about this. Alternate drawbridge, but we're without a prop between the knees this time. So we're trusting that our legs are, about a little wider than hips distance, but the legs are certainly parallel forward and hopefully the feet. So you want to kind of feel them push down and then lift up. Blanket could be removed if it feels too much pressure in your neck. Lower down. Last time. This time when you inhale, feel the arch of the back, the scoop of the tailbone, the lift of the front of the thighs, the most simple version that you can create, nothing added, bridge flow. Okay, now as you lower your spine and you lower down through the whole track of the back of the pelvis, hug the legs in, hold the back of the legs versus the kneecaps, and rock a little side to side. Okay, now feel where it might be comfortable for you to balance the weight in both sides of the pelvis here for a moment. And then reach to your feet with your hands on the sides of your feet towards happy baby pose. So you're trying to get a complete shape of decompressing the lumbar spine to the thoracic and that sensation of the pelvic floor. Remember that starts at the diaphragm in this version. So the diaphragm all the way down to the very front of your hip hip sensation. Okay, now lower down your hands, slide them back to the back of the legs and lower your feet. And then as they all the way to the bolster, you're gonna look around to the right side of your space, and then I would just take the bolster that's down by your feet and kick it over to the right, knowing that the height on my bolster, I like it a little higher than I usually make it. So I'm gonna add my blanket, and I'm gonna slide my bolster up to my shoulder, add my blanket, and then push it back down. So kind of prop etiquette and how we layer it is a practice on its own, isn't it? So we lower the right leg, and then as we cross the left thigh over to the bolster, and blankie for me, I'm going to get a hold of my grippy ball, place it at the sacrum, and then add, it's kind of a guessing game where the sand is, maybe overhead, to the sand to the exterior left thigh, and layer it so that you feel like, oh, it's connected. Maybe it's not where you've had it before, like the top of the thigh or the knee. Maybe it's kind of twisted a little bit in the middle of the leg. So play with the range of the left hip. If you're pretty plain ranger, right, you just kind of have a plain way of doing it, you cross it, you might be very content with that, and that's something to notice where you get that calm. You might be curious about the possibilities with the sand. And then bring your arms to cactus. See if you can do cactus on this one. If not, half cactus, the left arm open. That's a good one too. Turning your head to the left. And just let your eyes rest inwards. Right, and by now you may have kind of collected your thoughts and come into the practice by now. And just let yourself continue to sink into that sensation of being supported, feeling the twist through the back into the hip, and maybe into the leg muscles themselves. Repeating the breath, repetition, exhalations. Now, when we move the sand, we're going to actually do a little rolling if you have a ball. If you don't, you can do knees to chest and alternate knee into chest or windshield wiper. So I'll show the ball first, but we'll bring our knees both to that right side so they kind of tuck over to the right to the bolster. And then that gives me a little bit of weight difference in my right side of my back of my pelvis. So I got to be a little careful how I scoop up onto the ball. So I'm going to put down my right foot and then lift up my left knee a little bit and then let that ball be under the left buttock and use the balance of weight and movement on the ball to massage through the glutes. You can massage over on the outside of the left buttock. You can take the ball to the right buttock and massage. If there is a space that you know can use some massage work that's on either glute or either hip, you might let that kind of dominate your focus for a few moments. And those that aren't doing that self-massage, alternate a knee to the chest, get a few of those in, and then add windshield wiper. And then knees back into the chest. Okay, so give that motion a few more moments before we change the crossover. And if you're using the ball, remember you could roll all the way over to one side and get that sensation through the side of the buttock into the hip, or even into the side of the leg. Right? You could place the ball so it's to the side of the leg and lift up a little. Okay, so change the bolster now to that left side. Take a moment Get your muscles bound up in your arms to get it over there or kick it over there. And then we let the left leg relax. And as the right leg goes across, I'll give a quick memory refresher. If you still have focus here right now, a few more moments. When we used the belt previously, when we were on the bolster and we crossed the leg over, we were going across and down. When we started class, we did the side stage, and then we got up on the bolster and went across and down. So it has a little bit of a theme here. Now I'm going to try moving a little on my left hip and add the ball and the stand. Yeah, so as we come to kind of a completion here, you might find what is really comfortable for you, and then maybe you're one that wants to find a challenge in it too. So that would be if the hip wasn't as turned, if I was a little more flat on my back. That's a more challenging one. So feel the cactus arms, or feel one of them in cactus, one open. Turn your head to the right. Relax the eyes back deep into the brain. Now feel the actual sweeping motion of the breath in the belly. If it's dominating up in the rib cage where your arm has motion open, just noticing where it's easiest for you to stretch your breath. Chest, ribs, belly. And that's where we're going to go into our final pose, is going those 3-part breathing patterns. So give this a few more moments. Feel the crossover, feel the layer in the leg stretching. Okay, now as you move the ball first, okay, we're going to try to keep this element of support for our legs. Okay, so when I take the sand aside, I'm going to bring the knees from that left side into the chest, and then take a spinal roll or 2 or 3 to come up. And maybe you do a couple rolls because it feels kind of nice on the spine. And then what we'll take is the bolster on a block set. So your block set is a perfect balance. If your bolster, or if you want to use a chair, like a folding chair or a couch or something that's higher than this, you can also use that in your home. There's a lot of options, huh? Maybe some shelving. A bookcase or 2. Put your feet between the books. Okay, so I'll take the sand so it's on either shins or the ribs, and you want to have enough height. I like the idea of the blanket, even if it's an extra little thing to do. You can swaddle the legs, you can make a little bit of a roll of your blanket here, right? So it supports my calves. And then when you have that roll underneath, and you can either get your sand on your shins, or you might even use your ball if you have that under the sacrum. People might like that for a few moments. It kind of separates the circulation in that lower back. You know, especially if you spend a good amount of time, you know, sitting or in that same position with your back up, just feeling that a way to alleviate, or have your back flat. That's fine too. So sand is an option, period. And especially when we do a 3-part breathing focus, we have the sand lengthwise on the torso. So it does go to my right at the base of my sternum, right where the ribs intersect. And then it goes down past the diaphragm to the front of the pelvis. And then as my back decides if it wants to be on that ball, I say no. Let the arms feel some separation and direction with the shoulders blending back comfortably to the floor, like there's this nice peaceful balance internally that you're witnessing in the body, and maybe the mind is affecting that at this point. So feel the 3-part breathing, starting from the concept of the belly moving up with the breath, and then it moves up into the mid-thoracic, and then up into the chest. And then as you exhale, let the breath pour out of the mouth, and the belly descend back to the spine. Now, if you find that you come back to a breath and you notice that it seems to be all the same, feel if you can make an awareness, creating that focus at the very base of the abdomen, where it domes, just below that space where there's maybe not a lot of sensation with kind of the bulging of the belly. So it's like you visualize that space below that pelvic floor, using this as weight training, right, for the breathing muscles. It's a nice thing about the sand, even if it's something that you're not liking as much in the front, use it for weight training from time to time for your breathing muscles. Now, when the breath is trying to move its way all the way up to the chest, not all the way to the collarbones, but high up, then exhale and let go. Integrate the practice to move into the day with a sense of balance, if there's any part that's kind of flinching and not quite grounded, bring some attention there. It might be mental versus the physical body. Sometimes that's what is in the practice, is your physical body arrives fairly soon, it stays, but the mind can go fast away. So let's bring the emphasis for the last few moments into the collective consciousness a bit. So feeling that support from others that surround you in the practice, out there, in here with breath. Now finally, we remove any sand that we have layered on us. If you have it on the shins, you'll take it off in a gradual, kind way, maybe in a few seconds when it's easiest to bring the knees in. And then when you start to move your shape, you're going to circle through the feet, go both directions. Assess the balance in the spine. That's quite nice to lengthen your back, bring both arms overhead, do that full body reach with the ribs, the arms, the hands, and then that ripple effect back through the spine. Reach your hands to the legs, and then if you can adjust to bring your knees into your hands and the hands into the legs, and scoop it up, scoop it all up. And then as you have that scoop of yourself, you're going to draw the knees around side to side and roll to the side and help yourself up. And let's come up for a moment and collect focus, centering on your sitting bones and feeling the hands rising up and letting the brain simply bow down to your heart center. Surrendering here, simply breathing in together. And exhaling thoroughly all the way to the ends of the breath, bowing into your heart. In gratitude, namaste. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
How did that go?